Hello and welcome to Upward Trajectory. Today I am happy to announce my guest, Andrea Powels-Gullick, and she has her company, Soulful Living with Andrea. Thank you so much, Andrea, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jen. It's awesome to be here. So thanks for having me.
Well, I was so excited to have you on because we had a conversation a couple weeks ago and your story really resonated with me. And I was hoping you could share some of that and some of what you went through and how that kind of shaped and made you into not only the person you are today, but what you're doing with your life and your career today.
Yeah, so I guess we all have a story and a journey, and mine started off in my parenting journey. Something that I'd always aspired to do and be was to become a mum, get married, and all of those good things, which I did do by the ripe old age of 24. And by the time I was 27, I'd experienced the birth of two of my children. My first son was diagnosed with cancer at 2 days old, though, chemotherapy, and went into remission when he was 10 months old. And then at 27 with another little 8-month-old baby, I was to become widowed. And so all of the dreams that I'd had growing up and everything that I'd wanted to achieve, I had done, but had also sort of shattered in my lap only a few short years later. So that really did send me on quite a introspective journey of being able to not only overcome the trauma and manage mental health that I encountered afterwards, but I guess to really search for the meaning of life and to search for my meaning of life and what I believed that our journey was about and why these things happened and what they were really sent here, I guess, for me to learn and how to grow and expand from those hardships and from encounters where I felt like I would never be happy again. And I guess that is brought me, I really guess that instigated the journey and the personal development journey that has sort of now taken on the form of being a coach and a mentor for other people in terms of creating life outcomes that they want regardless of kind of what has happened. And primarily for women in the midst of an identity crisis, I do feel like that is a pretty big topic in our society, and it's a topic that you don't necessarily need trauma or really extreme hardship or anything like that. I think that just with the pressures of life and the busyness of our life and the programs and maybe the family dynamics and things like that, I think that a lot of the time for women in particular, we get to a certain age and really start to wonder ourselves, who are we underneath all of the expectation and the obligation and the I need to do this and where's my self-worth and self-belief and things like that. So I love being able to see people, you can see it in their eyes and in their presence of the awareness when you help to join those dots together. It really is quite euphoric to be a part of that journey with people. So yeah, that's kind of how I got here today, I guess. Yeah.
Well, that's so inspirational, and I love to hear when people overcome things and they find happiness again, they find joy and purpose. And I know there's probably people listening right now that maybe are in the midst of a struggle, they're in the lowest of their lows, and they just don't know where to start. And do you have any advice for, if you're just so pushed down and so in such a hole that you just don't even know where to start digging out and how to start, getting back into joy and life again? Do you have any suggestions for them?
Yeah, so I guess for me, my lowest of lows, and I don't want to skirt around that because I'm all for recovery, and I think that there's lots of different tools. So, a part of my journey was to go to the doctor, and a part of my journey was to go onto medication, of which I came off years ago. But my advice is that to be really honest with where you're at, and if it is at a place where you don't think that you can go it alone, to to push through that guilt and shame of that. But for, you know, for things that aren't at that level, one of the best things that I ever used was mantra. I remarried and we had a daughter together, and I have an amazing, beautiful life, a fabulous second husband. We have traveled together. We have lived lots of dreams and have quite just a beautiful, like, soul enriched, content life. And but to be able to shift that negative, like I ended up with post-traumatic and postnatal anxiety when I had our daughter. And mantra was actually, as simple as that sounds, was one of the most powerful things that I use, because what happens is when we're in a negative pattern, when we've got a cycle or a loop going, whatever that is, and mine was, her cry was my trigger. It would trend, and managing an 8-month-old baby that was really quite restless and things like that. But I wasn't doing anything to manage the trigger. So the trigger would go, and so my mindset would kick into, oh my gosh, she's never going to sleep. She's never going to sleep. I can't do this. But I wasn't doing anything with that. And then that creates a spiral, and the spiral goes down. And then if you don't do anything to kind of put a block in, you'll end up with the fight or flight and the adrenaline. Once the adrenaline releases, then, you know, there's not much you can do to come back from that. You have to wait for that to sort of wear off. So the mantra that I put in place with the help of someone. So first and foremost, I honestly believe is reach out to someone that can actually support you with this, because the reality is, if you could do it on your own, you wouldn't be where you are.
Right.
So if you're in a place where it's really, really not great, chances are you're not going to get out on your own. So reaching out to a person that you trust, you know, get a recommendation of a counselor or a mentor or a coach or someone that can take a journey with you to help identify what goes on. But then for me, it was that mantra of, my baby is crying, that is normal, and I'm okay. Because the mindset is, and in terms of that loop, is irrational. And the way to stop it is actually to stay in the present moment with a rational belief. And that was that, yes, my baby was crying, but I was okay. That was normal, and I was okay. And that was kind of the thing that short-circuited the loop that would spiral me into that thing. And if, you know, that does go into days, it stretches. So today just stretched into tomorrow, that stretched into the next week and the next week. And before you know it, that's just how you're living your life, the space of which you're living your life from.
And it's a downward spiral. Yeah. So I love how you bring up the trigger, because I think that's so important to
Absolutely.
understand.
Yeah.
That, you know, there's a point where you start to go down in a bad way, and realizing it when you're not there, but when you're still up higher, realizing that point so you can counteract the negative and you can bring yourself back into the present. That's so important. Are there any tools you use to identify your trigger?
I can just feel it. Like, I just know, I guess I've done so much in terms of my journey that I know what my pain points are. I guess I know what my themes are, and, you know, my themes, like, there could be another trigger that comes up, but obviously my baby crying, and I haven't had any more children, so that's definitely a trigger I haven't had to deal with. But just in other areas of my life, like there's money triggers, and so I know what the themes are now. So tapping, I've used a lot of EFT tapping to be able to sort of short circuit the energy and reconnect. So I do a lot of that type of work. A lot of journaling. I'm into manifesting, and so I spend a lot of time writing out or sitting with what I want to draw in, opposed to what I like, and sort of keep what I don't want in out, if that makes sense.
That makes absolute sense.
But in saying that, like, a really important thing and a really powerful part of my journey that I really like to share, because this is sort of came later in my journey, when I started a holistic sort of journey in terms of wanting to be able to heal myself and accept my experiences and move my life in a direction that felt conducive to happiness and contentment. I thought that it was all about positivity, and I thought it was all about just getting better and being nicer and kinder to myself, and better, more positive. And one of the most powerful things that I've ever kind of encountered was the willingness to actually accept the things I didn't like about myself, because they, in fact, are the triggers in a lot of ways. So trauma triggers are different, but in terms of, feeling, so self-esteem and self-belief and self-worth and all of those, the things that we don't like about ourselves are the triggers, because that's the experiences from the outside world that will trigger those thoughts and feelings. It's people in our outside world that will trigger. And so it's almost like we try to run and hide of our personality, and therefore they hold a power against us.
Very
And,
interesting. I had not heard
and
of
so
that term before.
yeah, and so there has been more power in me sitting with and accepting all of my shitty attributes than actually the gifts that I have. And for me, when we don't, like, it's almost like we sit in a nothingness. So sometimes we are so afraid to shine a light on our gifts because we're worried we'll be judged or criticized, or other people, won't like us because, we're all good at this. And so we kind of downplay them. And then we kind of hide and shrink away from the other things because, what happens if I'm defensive or I'm judgmental, or that'll be held against me. And so we sit in this nothingness when in fact what we need to be doing is actually accepting our wholeness. That actually our wholeness is a combination of all the things we can be. So I can be loving, I can be successful, I can be sarcastic, I can be temperamental, and then we get to choose.
Yeah,
If you can.
I was just going to say, I love the way that you've articulated that. That makes so much sense. That you're right. We try and just focus on the positive, but we are in essence imperfect, and we have imperfections. And when we accept that fully, imperfections and all, that's when we're truly authentic. It's not when we try and hide and suppress and pretend those parts don't exist, because that's when the inauthenticity comes out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, you
Well,
just
I
cut out
really.
there. Oh, there you go. So
Sorry, I think we're having a little glitch from, we're halfway across the world here, from the DC area over to Australia. So I think we're having a few glitches, so I apologize for that. But I think overall we're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
So you take us back. So you went through these traumatic events, you recovered, you used what you needed to do in medication and the help of other people. And then you got to the point where you realized that you wanted to help other people. And how has that transpired for you? How did that go about, and what are you doing today?
So probably the first thing that happened was I actually started blogging, and I don't know why I did that. That was, quite a few years. I was remarried and everything by then, and life was really quite beautiful. But I just did. And it was called Learning Through Yearning. And I think I took inspiration from seeing other people sort of talk about their journey, and I didn't realize how therapeutic it would be. And so I would just, different things that would come up, from losing my husband to repartnering to children, and people started to read it, and people started to actually tell me I was a good writer, because I didn't realize that I was. So it was just something that I did. And then I had someone tell me, you should write a book. And I was sort of, I wasn't at that point of accepting my gifts at that stage, I guess. And so I was a bit like,
yeah. So then,
it's great.
so you didn't.
But it was from that point.
Oh,
And it just,
go ahead.
so it just continued from there, in terms of realizing that my ability to share from such an authentic and truthful, open, honest space actually impacted other people, and that I wanted to be able to continue to build on that. So I continued to write, I continued, then I went on to get my coaching accreditation that I could actually hold space for people. So, and then wanting to follow a speaking career as well. So actually in a process at the moment of building that and speaking to audiences about how we can overcome things and the principles that I believe that are behind that. And realistically, on terms of that, there's 5 A's, and the first one is awareness, that we can't ever move through anything that we're not aware of. Acceptance, if we don't accept our whole self, then we can never really truly be able to move through those triggers that hold us back. Alignment, that we have to know our own heart and what is right for us, and we need to align with that, not with what somebody else wants for us or what we're told. Then we have to take action, because the rest will never happen. It doesn't matter how much you have, how much awareness, how much action you take, how aligned you are. If you don't take the action changes. And then the final way, or reaching what you really know your full potential is, then you have to reach out to find the person or the thing or the tool that will keep you accountable. But for me, that is the 5 A's that are so essential, I believe, in being able to help people transform their life.
I love how you break that down into 5 A's. That's easy for people to remember and to go back to when you maybe start to spiral or you start to trigger, and you just go back to those A's. That's great.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add, or anything else that we can learn from what you've experienced or what you're doing now?
No, just that I guess the part that I missed with the alignment is that that's about our values. And really, if you're in a place that you don't feel like you want to stay forever, it's really important that you look at your values, situations up to your values, to turn it around.
Absolutely. Great. Well, if listeners want to get a hold of you or reach out to you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
I have 2 main spaces. So really, soulfullivingwithandrea.com.au is my website, and you can come through and message me through there. Or I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all varying ways to reach out if you need to. But again, it's Soulful Living with Andrea. So yeah.
Great. Well, I love the name, The Soulful Living with Andrea, because I feel like you embody that and you really embrace it and live it authentically, and that really shines through. So thank you so much, Andrea, for being on. I really appreciate it. I'm sure people got a lot from this. And please join us for the next version of our podcast, which is coming up soon. Thanks so much. Take care.